So hey everybody, I was born in ME. Anybody? Maine, good job. I know Michelle knows. Any dads? There's a few dads out there, I'm sure. I'm a dad. I'm actually a father of six, as it turns out. Six teenagers. I've got 6 teenagers right now. 1 son and 3 daughters by birth, and then 2 sons that my wife and I adopted last January from a Ukrainian orphanage. And if you know anything about teenagers, they have needs, and teenage orphans have some additional needs, like they need to be accepted, the need for applause that they haven't received in their life, the need for hope that their future is going to be brighter than the past that they've known. They need to learn how to shower. I mean, honestly. It's funny, you know. So my wife and I pursued this idea of adoption, kind of with the idea that there's people in the world that need help, and we wanted to be helpers. You know, okay, so great. And we figured that the needs that teenage orphans have, you know, were needs that we could meet. And so after a year of preparation and some tedious, you know, paperwork and 3 trips to Ukraine, I find myself in Kiev. On the 3rd floor of an apartment building after 3 trips. And in my custody is Alex, age 15, and Thomas, age 13. And we're getting ready for our trip back to America from Ukraine to start kind of a redefined view of what family really means to us. So this is the story of that day, our trip from Ukraine back to America, kind of just to start this new life. So I didn't sleep that night prior to the trip back. Our taxi driver was supposed to meet us at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was nervous because I was still kind of jet lagged and everything, that I was gonna miss my alarm, and so I was gonna miss my flight back to the United States. I didn't want that to happen. So I stayed up through the night, and the taxi driver was supposed to meet us at 5 o'clock, and our flight was at 6:50, and I'd gone through the Kiev airport a couple times previously. It's a pretty small airport. I mean, Kiev's a big city, but it's a pretty small airport. I knew it pretty well, so it's a 30-minute drive to the airport. So the first wrinkle was that the taxi driver showed up at 5:15, so 15 minutes late, so, you know, whatever. I had a little bit of margin, but not a lot of margin. Starting to get a little bit nervous. So the second wrinkle was this taxi driver. His name was Sergey. He spoke a little bit of English. The hatch on his hatchback car was like busted, so you couldn't open the hatch in the hatchback. So we're cramming our luggage in. And this is like everything that these boys own, which really wasn't much, you know, after all. But we're cramming all of our luggage in the side doors and like over the back seat, like into the back hatch, because that's the only way we could get there. So that was wrinkle number 2, and we're losing time as we go. And then we got ourselves into the car. We got kind of crammed in. I'm sitting in the front seat next to Sergey. And then wrinkle number 3 was Sergey looks over at me and he says, "I think we should pray." And I'm like, okay. You know, I got nothing against prayer. I believe in prayer, you know, and prayer works. But I thought the timing was a little odd here. I mean, you're 15 minutes late, and you're like, okay, now you want to take more time. I think we should pray. So I'm like, make it quick. All right. So Sergey does his prayer, and we drive 30 minutes to Kiev airport. So wrinkle number 4 is the mistake I made, was that I should not have tried the self-service kiosk. Because I've got a U.S. passport, 2 Ukrainian passports, and what I realized is when you go through the self-service, you have to like type in your address of destination in the United States when you get back. And so, but you know, I'm kind of self-reliant, and I figure I can get through this just fine. So it takes me a little longer than I expected, but I get my boarding passes, and I was a little alarmed when I saw it said standby on them. So I was a little bit nervous. Clock's ticking. My flight's at 6:50. But the biggest mistake was that I failed to recognize in my self-service kiosk experience that I forgot to check in my 3 bags. which is kind of bad. I realized that when I was at the front of the security line, and I'm like, I got more bags right now than I planned to have at this point in time. I should have dropped those off somewhere along the way. Might have been the sleep deprived. It might have been the whole new experience. But anyway, so I go through the security line twice. I get through, and the time is now, so our flight's leaving at 6:50, and it's now 6:30. But I'm through security, so I'm like home free. We got to get through customs now. And I'd gotten through customs before. It was just me and my wife, but now it's me. It's not my wife. Instead, it's two guys. These are immigrants. All right. So there's some nuances here that I didn't really fully appreciate going into it. So and not only immigrants, but immigrants that I don't speak their language. They don't speak my language. The guy stamps my passport, but Alex comes up next. And the border guy asks him, this is wrinkle number 5, I think we're up to, where's your mother? Her signature was on all the papers, but like she was not there. This is an experience that I had a year to prepare for, and I knew that I was 100% legit, but in this guy's mind, I was 100% dependent on him saying yes. Well, I'm not an expert in Ukraine, but I did take 3 years of Russian in high school, and I understood when he didn't say yes, he said, "Nyet." All right? That means no. I'm 100%, helpless. I'm 20 minutes from plane departure, and I'm 200 feet away, but I might as well have been 200 miles away. And my success of this trip was like completely in this guy's hands. And right now, I'm really hoping that Sergei's prayers are starting to kick in, and we can get this thing moving along. So I get escalated to the supervisor, and they go back into the back room, and I'm like, hoping. Now I'm praying myself, and fortunately, the story takes a turn for the good. And 2 minutes later, I come back with a positive outcome, and they say, yes, you can fly. I'm like, whew, we get our passport stamp, and now I am flying. I'm flying through the terminal, I'm running full speed. I'm going past the duty-free vodka, which is like awesome in Ukraine. Vodka's cheaper than water in Ukraine, and I had tested that out. I'd bought some back in previous visits, but I didn't have time for that now. So the people are at the gate, and they're holding the door open. They're holding the plane for us, and we're 2 minutes after the door should have closed. We're on the plane. I'm like, whew, this is awesome. All right, we got through this far. So there are multiple itineraries that I could have taken, back from Kiev back to the United States, and the deal is when you go to Ukraine, for an adoption like this, you don't exactly know when you're going to come back. You've got appointments you have to make, you have to get visas, you have to get passports. And so it was the night before when I finally talked to my travel agent and nailed down my flight itinerary, which turned out to be, he gave me 3 choices. I took his third choice, which was Kiev to Amsterdam to Minneapolis to Cedar Rapids. And I picked that one because I knew that at my port of entry, which in this case was Minneapolis, I was going to need to have enough time to get through customs so that I could, make my connecting flight home. So here we are on the plane, and fast forward, we got through Amsterdam, we got to Minneapolis. So Minneapolis, I'm happy to be back in the United States, and customs there is a little bit different. There's 6 lines, so I pick a line, I get up to the front of the line. It takes about 30 minutes for me to get to the front of the line, and the customs officer there understands our situation, that I've adopted these kids, and he says, so, hey, do you speak Ukrainian? I'm like, no. And he asks the boys, well, do you speak English? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, okay, well, then you guys need to go over to this other line. Usually that's kind of annoying if you've been waiting 30 minutes in line and then you realize you have to go to the other line. But in this case, it ended up being the highlight of my trip and one of the most unexpected, happy coincidences of my entire life. Because at this other line was a dude, I don't know his name. He happened to be from Odessa. And if you guys don't know your geography as well as Michelle Hedke does, Odessa is a city in Ukraine. And this customs officer had immigrated from Ukraine 40 years prior. So what are the odds of that? I actually checked Wikipedia to find out what the odds of that are, guys. So there's actually 0.33% of the United States population is Ukrainian. That's based on the 2006 U.S. Census. So that's, of Ukrainian origin. So first generation Ukrainians, I'm not sure. It's got to be a lower percentage. Now the odds that this guy would have also been himself an orphan in Ukraine before he immigrated to America was even more unlikely. And the odds that we would have been coming through Minneapolis, which was my third choice of itinerary at a time when he was there at the end of his shift, actually had to get approval from his supervisor to stay 5 minutes extra so he could service us through the customs line. The odds are pretty insurmountable. And I was just saying, man, this is pretty cool. And Sergey knows what he's doing. So the processing through was actually pretty quick. So the paperwork gets stamped, and then this border guy he looks at me and he says, "Do you mind if I have a few words with your boys?" And I was like, "Well, they don't understand anything I say to them, So because we don't really share a common language yet. So yeah, sure, go right ahead. It'll be the first words that they understand of the whole trip." So he talks to him for about 30 seconds, and I can't help myself before we move past. I got to ask this guy, well, what'd you tell him? And he said, I told him that you're in America now, and the rules are different here, and now you're part of your father's house, and your job is to help him by doing what he says. I was like, well, that's pretty cool. If I could speak Ukrainian, that's what I would have told him too. Your job is to help him. The big grand notion that my wife and I had when we started this road towards adoption was that we were going to help kids who needed help. And yet the advice that the dude from Odessa was telling my kids was that their job was to help me. And if I reflect on that day, I got a lot of help that day, a lot of help that I didn't think I needed, but a lot of help that came from some unexpected directions. And no matter what form it came in, whether it was the dude from Odessa or whether it was the folks at the gate that held the plane long enough so that I could get on while I was struggling through customs in Kiev, or whether it was Sergey in the taxi just wanting to pray for me, whatever form that help came in, I needed it, even though I didn't realize it. I accepted it, and I totally appreciated all the help that I got. And that's all I got.